Sunday, September 4th, the second afternoon session at 3:30 p.m. Okay, are we ready to resume? Okay, one of the effects of this practice of what is called counter-insight, now, even in the stage of the advanced stage of the knowledge of rise and fall, there still seems to be an observer, sort of, even though one is observing the arising and passing away of phenomena, but there's still a sense of an observer who's somehow standing behind the process, observing the arising and falling away. But when one does the practice of the counter-insight, whereby one reflects back on each state of consciousness that observed the breakup and sees how that state of consciousness has also broken up and passed away, then the sense of a subject standing behind the process, observing the arise and fall, that appearance of the observer gets knocked away. It's not yet eradicated, but it's, in the course of this contemplation, it's dismantled, because you see that even the apparent observer is also breaking up and passing away from moment to moment. Okay, when one is seeing all of the formations, that's the conditioned phenomena, or the five aggregates that make up one's own being, constantly breaking up and passing away, breaking up and passing away. One could also then extend, sort of temporarily, extend the reflection outwards to encompass the world. And then one sees that all other sentient beings, at least all other human beings, are also just conglomerations of these five aggregates that are breaking up and passing away. So there's just in everything, even the outer material world is also constantly breaking up and passing away. And so one gets the sense that there's no security at all in the world. So everything appears to be just unreliable, undependable. And this gives rise to the next knowledge, which is called the knowledge of appearance as fearful. Actually, the Visuddhimagga describes this very nicely. A little bit maybe exaggerated to make a point, but it says, as one repeats, develops, and cultivates the contemplation of dissolution, of the destruction, fall, and breakup of all formations, then formations appear to one in the form of a great terror, just as lions, tigers, leopards, flaming coal pits, and so on appear to a timid man who wants to live in peace. And so when one sees how past formations, everything in the past has ceased, how the present formations, everything that's come into being at present is ceasing, and one knows inferentially that whatever is going to arise in the future will break up and pass away in just the same way, then the knowledge of appearance as fearful arises. And it is called appearance as fearful because formations in all realms of existence are fearful in being bound for destruction, and so they appear only as fearful. But one word of clarification is needed here. in this knowledge of appearance as fearful, one is not oneself experiencing fear. So the mind is not gripped by actual fear, thinking, oh, I'm afraid, there's no place to go. But it's actually, maybe, it might sound strange to say this, a very blissful experience. But one sees that things, objectively speaking, are insecure, not dependable, not reliable. So in that respect, you could say that they're fearful, but one is not in the grip of fear oneself. The Visuddhimagga clears that up. I didn't include the passage here. Okay, then the knowledge of appearance as fearful, this sort of spills over into the next insight knowledge, and it's a bit difficult to distinguish the two. I don't really understand clearly the distinction between the two, but I took the essential explanation. So it says, as one repeats, develops, and cultivates the knowledge of appearance as fearful, one finds no asylum, no shelter, no place to go, no refuge in any realm of existence. In all the realms of existence, there is not a single formation, a single thing that one could place one's hopes in or hold onto. Rather, the three realms of existence appear like charcoal pits full of hot coals, burning, blazing, and glowing with the 11 fires. What are the 11 fires? The fires of birth, old age, sickness, and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair. Actually, sickness is not separately included. So it would be the fires of greed, hatred, delusion, birth, old age, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. And then all formations appear as a huge mass of dangers, destitute of satisfaction or substance, like a calamity or an affliction. Maybe one could say that the lady doth protest too much. So it's a bit depicted very graphically in order to drive home the point. But I think that these two knowledges are really just following in sequence from the perception or the insight into the dissolution, that everything is just, it's like quicksand under one's feet, just breaking up and passing away. And if one stepped into a mass of quicksand, one wouldn't consider that it's very secure and safe. And so one could see the pit of quicksand as fearful, and the act of stepping into it as being dangerous. In any case, as one is contemplating the knowledge with the knowledge of danger, then comes what is called nibbida, which is translated as disenchantment. So one then becomes disenchanted with the manifold field of formations. This means like the whole universe of conditioned phenomena. So belonging to all the realms of existence. So if one turns one's attention even to the heavenly realms, like ordinary people think, oh, may I be reborn in heaven and enjoy the bliss of the heavens. But one thinks, okay, what are the beings in the heavens? They're just conditioned phenomena breaking up, passing away, breaking up and passing away, even up to the form realm, the formless realm, all the three realms of existence. Everything is just from moment to moment breaking up and perishing. And so then the mind, of course, one is seeing the danger, the drawbacks in all of these realms of existence. So one loses one's enchantment one's fascination, one's attachment to existence in all of these realms. And so this is the disenchantment. And then it gives a nice simile, just as the golden swan that loves the foothills of Cheetah Peak that's in the Himalayas finds delight not in a filthy puddle at the gate of a village of outcasts. There seems to be like some still caste prejudice here. But only in the 7 great lakes, I guess these are the great lakes in the Himalayas, so too this meditator, the meditator compared to a swan, finds no delight in the formations which are seen clearly as danger, as dangerous, but only in contemplation. Okay, then when this knowledge of disenchantment has set in, then one becomes disenchanted with all the formations in all realms of existence. So then the mind no longer sticks fast, cleaves, or fastens onto them, and one wishes to be liberated from the whole field of formations and to escape from it. So this is now the arising of what is called the knowledge of desire for liberation. And then it raises the question, like, what is this like? It's just like a fish in a net, a frog in the jaws of a snake, a deer fallen into the clutches of a strong snare, a snake in the hands of a snake charmer, an elephant stuck fast in a great bog, or a man encircled by enemies. Just as these wish to be freed, to find an escape from them, from these things, so too this meditator's mind wants to be liberated from the whole field of formations and to escape from it. Okay, so then when one no longer relies on any formations, and one no longer places one's hopes and expectations on any kind of material form, feeling, perception, the mental formations, consciousness, and one wants to be freed from the whole field of formations, then knowledge of desire for liberation arises. Okay, now when this desire for liberation arises, then one has to strengthen one's insight into the 3 characteristics by going back now. You see, as these knowledges have been arising, the knowledge of appearance as fearful, knowledge of danger, knowledge of disenchantment, the desire for liberation. In the background, there's the awareness of the impermanence of all formations, but it's fallen into the background, and these other considerations or contemplations have come into the foreground. But now that the desire for liberation has arisen, in order to propel that desire through the remaining barriers of delusion and ignorance, one has to go back to the 3 characteristics and now strengthen one's insight into the 3 characteristics by considering them from different aspects, from different angles. And this is called knowledge of reflection, in the sense of not reflection in the sense of thinking and pondering, but reflection in the sense of going back to examine again what one has already passed through. So in order to be liberated, one again examines those same formations, attributing to them the 3 characteristics. And so this is knowledge by contemplation of reflection. And so one sees all formations. This is called the 40 modes of examination, as impermanent, Is there some music? What is it? Really? Okay, and let us continue. We don't want to interrupt. Okay, so one examines all the sankharas, the formations, as impermanent in these respects. That some of these seem just like synonyms for impermanence, but they're different angles that might appear to different meditators. So it's non-continuous, temporary, limited by rise and fall, disintegrating, fickle, perishable, unenduring, subject to change, coreless, which I would put with anatta, with non-self, due to be annihilated, conditioned, subject to death, etc. Then one sees them as dukkha for the following reasons: because they are continuously oppressed by rise and fall, hard to bear, a basis for pain, a disease, a tumor, a dart, a calamity, an affliction, and so forth, subject to sorrow, lamentation, despair, subject to defilement, and so forth. Then one sees them as not self for the following reasons, or from the following angles: because they are alien, that is, not one's own, not one's self. They are empty. They are vain or hollow. Maybe hollow is better than vain. Void, ownerless, with no inner master, with no inner controller. And it might seem like an imposing task to examine formations from all of these 40 angles. But again, Mahasi Sayadaw comes to our rescue, and he says, 396. He says, okay, the more innate wisdom or acquired learning one has, the more apparent and distinct these aspects, these 40 aspects will become. They grow even more clearly apparent with the insights that lead to the higher stages of past knowledge. However, if one can clearly see just one of these 40 aspects, one's insight is good enough to attain past knowledge. This is because the past knowledge occurs immediately after seeing a single aspect of the universal characteristics at the highest stage of insight. So it's not really necessary to examine the phenomena from all 40 of these points of view, but one can just examine them primarily from the standpoint of impermanent, dukkha, and non-self. And when one uses those primary headings, sometimes other words, other ways of characterizing that characteristic will occur to the mind. And so one can consider the phenomena from that point of view. Okay, from the knowledge of reflection, before one enters upon the next stage of insight knowledge, one goes through a process of contemplation, which is called discerning formations as empty, as sunya or sunyata. And so the text, Visuddhimagga says, one next discerns emptiness in what's translated as the double logical relation. Thus, this is empty of a self or of what belongs to a self. And the Visuddhimagga in these sections mentions emptiness, 4 aspects of emptiness: 6 aspects, 10 aspects, 12, up to 42 aspects of emptiness. But those are all just elaborations of the basic double emptiness, that is the emptiness of self and of what belongs to self. Or one could take it in 4 ways, maybe, that this I am empty of a self, and there's nothing that is mine, and others are empty of a self and of anything that truly belongs to them. So that's a 4-way contemplation of emptiness. And so in the earliest stages now, building up to this contemplation or observation of emptiness, the mind has gone through these stages of delight and exaltation in the meditation, and also the stages of perceiving fearfulness and danger, disenchantment, and that yearning for liberation. But when one goes through the contemplation of emptiness, then all of those sort of emotional embellishments of the experience sort of get evened out, smoothened out, and dispelled. So now one is able to enter upon the next insight knowledge, which is called the knowledge of equanimity about formations. Okay, so the Visuddhimagga explains, when one has discerned formations by attributing the 3 characteristics to them, that's through the knowledge of reflection, and seen them as empty in this way, empty of a self and of anything belonging to a self, then one abandons both fear and delight and becomes indifferent to them and neutral. Then it uses, okay, one takes them as neither I nor as mine. Then it uses a simile, just as a man who has divorced his wife. So if he sees his wife speaking to another man, laughing with another man, you know, they've separated, no more relationship, so there's no jealousy, no anger, but completely indifferent. Okay, and so this meditator, wanting to get free from all formations, discerns them by the contemplation of reflection, then seeing nothing to be taken as I or mine, one abandons both fear and delight and becomes indifferent and neutral towards all formations. So in the equanimity about formations, now the mind has become very balanced, and it can go on contemplating the formations in terms of their arising and passing away, in terms of the characteristics of impermanence, dukkha, non-self, but without any sense of fearfulness or danger arising. But one just goes on with a balanced equanimity, observing this constant arising and passing of phenomena, the mind in a kind of completely neutral mode, and it's very, the feeling tone of the experience is predominantly equanimity, no longer the highs, the blissful highs, the exaltation, the delight in the experience. And one could go on, it said, sitting for long periods, like 3 hours, even 6 hours, just observing formations, occurring and passing away, arising and passing away. Until, one can remain in that stage of contemplation for years. Not in one sitting, but one's progress and practice can remain there for years. Even one can remain there for the rest of one's life without going further. But we're going to take the case of the meditator who passes beyond equanimity about formations, because the next stage beyond equanimity about formations is the beginning of the process that leads directly to the supramundane, or the world-transcending path by which one makes the breakthrough from the world of conditioned phenomena to the unconditioned nibbana. But perhaps we should leave that for the evening session. And if there are people have questions, we could take some questions now. Let me get up. Okay, here, and is that Siu? Is that you? Okay.
We don't give it to Siu.
I want to give people who haven't had a chance to ask a chance. And what is, okay, what is your name?
Yeah, Andy.
Andy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've only ever done shamatha meditation, and in thinking about Vipassana, I mean, I wonder if, like, faith and aspiration and vows, did these just kind of show up as volitional formations? Do they disappear?
Wait, I'm not getting the question.
As you know, is aspiration or faith or vows or any of the kind of the illimitables that we think about in non-Vipassana meditation, did they just show up as volitional formations in Vipassana and they just go away?
Now I hear the question, but I'm not quite sure I understand it. You mean, does one have to make a vow to practice Vipassana meditation?
No, more like the opposite. I mean...
Or you mean, what happens when vows and aspirations arise?
Yeah.
Of course, at the outset of practice, one will make maybe a vow, a determination, have an aspiration, which motivates the practice. But when one is actually engaged in the process of contemplation, then one is not, to flow along with aspirations and vows that arise, but in order to maintain the flow of contemplation, whatever kind of mental state arises, one treats it just as a mental phenomenon that one notes and lets it go and then comes back to the primary object of contemplation. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
That helps.
Okay, see you?
Yeah, Bhante, this is you. So when you explained count insight, so you said during count insight, the sense of an observer behind the act of observing gets knocked down.
Yeah.
Could you connect this to Sakkaya Ditthi, the personality view? Is this how the personality view gets dropped down?
Not exactly, because this is something that's happening only temporarily during the course of contemplation. It doesn't mean that the personality view or Sakkaya Ditthi has been eradicated. That is what occurs only with the attainment of stream entry. But this is what I would say, it dispels the appearance of an observer behind the experience during the course of contemplation. But when the meditator comes out, one could still think in terms that appearance of the observer still can reappear again. Okay, Stephen.
Thank you, Bhante. I just have a quick question about nomenclature. I'm curious why, at least with the manual of 7 stages, the earlier stage is referred to as a path, the magga, amagga. And the next one is called the patipada, or the way. And is there a difference of meaning there? Or there's the Visuddhi magga, the path, but why is that different from a way? Or why is there a difference even made?
Yeah. I think well, it takes over these terms from that sutta on the simile of the relay of chariots. And pretty much let's say in sutta nomenclature, Magga and Patipada are pretty much synonymous. So the Buddha calls the path that he discovered the Majjhima Patipada. It's the middle way. And what is the middle way? But it's the Aryo Atangiko Maggo, the Noble Eightfold Path. So path and way, Magga and Patipada, in sutta terminology are pretty much synonymous. But in commentarial terminology, or in the Abhidhamma terminology, strictly the Magga denotes the four world transcending path experiences, which we haven't yet come to. And so here, because it's taken over the sutta terminology when it's speaking about knowledge of the path, of what is the path and what is not the path, it's speaking just in conventional or in ordinary terms, what is the right practice and what is the wrong practice. It's not yet referring to the world transcending path, which is the Magga in the Abhidhamma, the strict Abhidhamma terminology.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have Mano. Mano, he's in the back in the corner. Wu Lin Fascia.
Thank you, Bhante. Previously you mentioned that pain can be used in insight meditation to maybe progress further. Could you maybe elaborate on that?
That what can be used?
Pain when you're meditating.
Oh, pain. Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So I think I explained this morning, but I'll repeat the explanation, that pain becomes like a very valuable tool for the progress of insight, because our ordinary tendency when we experience pain is to try to avoid it, in the case of meditation, by readjusting the positions so that one gets more comfortable. And one thinks, when I'm experiencing pain, I can't meditate. And pain is, I would say, it's an obstacle to the serenity or samatha meditation. So for that reason, with samatha meditation, one should acquire a fairly comfortable position, but one should also, even in the samatha meditation, try to learn to sit through periods of pain and keep the mind focused on the primary object, despite the pain. But in the Vipassana meditation, when the pain becomes very conspicuous, then one can, well, initially when the pain arises and becomes somewhat conspicuous, then one just notes the pain, observing pain, pain, and then brings the mind back to the primary object, rising, falling, or in, out, in, out. But if the pain really becomes oppressive, then one turns to the pain itself and observes it. And the way it assists the development of insight is that when one focuses upon the continuity of pain, one sees that the pain that one takes to be an enduring experience actually consists of just brief flashes of pain. Each one is just arising and stopping, arising and stopping. And so this is giving a kind of initial insight into arising and passing away, that what seems to be a solid whole consists of discontinuous moments of experience. And so if one goes on observing the pain in that way, one gets the sense of the pain as a series of discontinuous experiences, and then one could bring that sense of how what appears to be continuous is actually a series of discrete occasions. One could bring it to the broader experience of the body, so that, say, the rising movement of the abdomen is actually then comes to be seen as just a series of discrete stages of rising, one building up like this, And then the falling movement, a series of discrete falls, like this. And the in-breath is like a series of discrete phases of breathing in. And out-breathing is out, 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 out. And one sees that each one is a discrete phase with its own arising and stopping. It's arising and stopping. And that way one is coming into a clearer discernment of arising and passing away. Okay, Sally?
Hi, Bodhi. Could you please explain knowledge of the fearful and the knowledge of danger? Because I personally have some experience, but I know it's only intellectual level, that I think in the reincarnation or rebirth, we couldn't control the environment. Sometimes we do unwholesome seeds and so on. And I feel, and I have fearful that, in future, what if I do some unwholesome? So how, and then when I have that fearful or danger, it's become very negative.
Then
become very negative.
Very negative.
Yeah. So how to turn this kind of fear or danger into kind of knowledge or something that's wisdom can benefit us, but not negative.
Yeah, that sense of the fear of the future, possible future rebirths, I mean, that is what should stir up a sense of urgency and at least should motivate one strongly to engage in wholesome actions. So I would say that here it's maybe reflection on karma, the workings of karma, that provides a sense of consolation or security, that one reflects that whatever, that I am the, this comes from the suttas, I am the heir of my karma, I am the owner of my karma, I have the karma as my guardian, my karma as my protector, whatever good or bad deeds I will inherit their result. So when one reflects in that way, then it motivates one to do more wholesome deeds and to avoid the unwholesome. And then if one engages repeatedly in wholesome deeds, then one can rejoice in one's own wholesome behavior, and that will provide a sense of, let's say, of happiness and security for the future. That should dispel that fear of the future.
But I think your text, when you explain the fear and the danger, it's not the same as...
No, it's not the same.
Yeah, I want to know what's the difference.
Yeah, what you were speaking about, if I understand it, is when you're considering the dangers of the dangers of a unfortunate rebirth, or rebirth under dangerous conditions. Like to be reborn in a country which is torn by war, in which people are being, bombarded, in which there's a civil war, or oppressive poverty, hunger, shortage of natural resources, and so on. So that's quite distinct from this knowledge of fearfulness, which is the knowledge that arises when one is seeing how conditioned phenomena, even when one is living in the most comfortable conditions, but those phenomena are always just dissolving and passing away. And so one sees that one can't rely on anything in the world. So one can, dispel the fears about the future by doing this reflection on karma, and then one gains a sense of confidence and security regarding the future. But still one understands whatever states there are in the future, even the most comfortable existence as a human being, or the most blissful existence as a deity in one of the heavenly realms, even those existence in those realms is beset by impermanence and insubstantiality.
Yeah, and bring some disappointed.
And also there's disappointment there. Yeah. Let's just see what the time is. Okay, we have 5 more minutes. Miricella, is that your name? Okay, Miricella and Min, then we have to stop.
Thank you, Bhante. I had a question about the breakup of consciousness in the counter insight.
Yeah.
Is that a forgetting?
Is that a what?
Is that a forgetting of that consciousness? If the observer can't observe the observer, does that mean C2 is forgetting the breakup? I'm just wondering what the breakup is. How does one experience the breakup of consciousness? Is it a forgetting of that previous consciousness?
There isn't a forgetting, though one is not actively one is actually not remembering the previous consciousness, because it's not something that happened long enough ago in the past that one has to remember it. It seems to be happening almost like in immediate succession, so that, okay, there's the consciousness that observes a material process break up, and then it seems almost immediately, the split second afterwards, the mind or consciousness is just turning back and noting that observation of the breakup of the material phenomena, that is also broken up and passed away. Does that make it clear? I would say it's neither remembering nor forgetting, because one has it available to one, but it's happening at such a micro level that it's almost like too small a unit to be remembered, and yet it's not that one has forgotten something, like one has forgotten, something that happened like yesterday. But it's just that the moments are occurring in such quick succession that one arises, one notes it, and it passes away. Yeah. And I said, Min?
Yes, thank you, Bhante.
Yeah.
I have a question about the whole thing, and start from purification of the view, and then next is purification of overcome the doubts, for example. And the sequence is when you finish kind of complete the purification of the view, then you can move to the next, or you can kind of simultaneously contemplate both.
Okay.
That is one thing. Another thing is really...
Let's take one question at a time. And maybe I'll have to ask you, because we've come to the end of the period, the second question you maybe write down, and unless is it directly connected with it?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And then when we start purification of the view, you gave us an example how to observe we move, walking meditation. And then my question is, when is the ending point of purification of the view based on that observation? You have to start from 3, and then you can become 8, become 12. How far, how subtle it will go. We say, okay, you finish this.
Okay, let me just answer both. I think I could answer both questions.
Thank you
That
so
these
much.
knowledges sort of flow into one another, so that it's not like there's a sharp distinction. At this point, you finish purification of you. Now you move into purification by overcoming doubt. But there is a distinction in those contemplations. So initially, one starts by purification of you, by discerning. One has to discern the mental and material phenomena first. Only then can one start to investigate their conditionality. And so one leads the purification of you, or knowledge of mind and matter leads into the purification by overcoming doubt, by discerning conditionality. So that one flows into the other. It's not a shop that you finish purification of view, like you finish 6th grade, now you're ready to go on to 7th grade.
Yeah, but the thing is, my question is also like for the material and the mental, and you can roughly split it. Like
roughly
you can recognize what is mental, what is material, but it doesn't mean the purification of view. So you reach to purification of the view. What level of you recognize the material, the mental? How far you go?
It goes in stages. It's actually extended over a long period of time, and is sort of progressively purified as one goes on with the practice. It's not like one reaches a stage where you can say suddenly, at this point, you've fully purified your view, but you have to keep on going back and renewing these practices.
Thank you.
Up to the point, I say, of stream entry. At that point, the view is really fully purified. Okay, I think we have to stop now, and you're supposed to have a 15-minute break, a 5-minute break, and then we come back. Let us come back at 4:25, and then we'll start the meditation at 4:25. And for this session, I want to guide you in the 32 parts of the body. Though it's a little difficult to get the 32 parts into a half an hour period, but we'll try.